Hello, everybody, and we're back with Archaeology with Flint Dibble, and I have a very special guest with me, Brent Lee. And Brent is a former conspiracist who was also a former fan of many different aspects of pseudoarchaeology, including Graham Hancock and David Icke and his reptile overlords conspiracies. And I'm here to talk to him about how archaeology, pseudoarchaeology, fake historical and archaeological narratives are wrapped up within the conspiracist belief system, narratives, community itself. So thank you a ton, Brent, for agreeing to chat. And this is kind of a follow-up. He invited me to chat and help him work through his journey getting out of some of these fringe beliefs. And one of the last one was beliefs in the narratives given by Graham Hancock. And so that's how we met. But for people that aren't familiar with you, you call yourself a conspiracist. What does that actually mean? And how is that different from a conspiracy theorist or other terms you might see in the media?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, Flint. I'm glad to speak to you again. The last conversation was brilliant. A conversation that I've played over in my head dozens of times as well.
Me
Um,
too.
so yeah, I'm Brent Lee. I'm the host of Some Dare Call It Conspiracy, and I'm a former conspiracist of 15 years. So the thing is, I like to differentiate between the idea of being a conspiracist and a conspiracy theorist. Conspiracy theories, you can break them down into event conspiracies, systemic conspiracies, and
Hmm.
then a grand conspiracy. And I think the first two, if you believe in that sort of stuff, you're more of just a conspiracy theorist.
Okay.
But if you believe in an overarching grand conspiracy, that becomes more of an ideology. That becomes more of a a religion, essentially. And to me, that's conspiracism. So you are a conspiracist, and
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
really wraps up exactly how I came to be like so deep down the rabbit hole of conspiracies. I think that's the best way of breaking it down, because I also like don't really think conspiracy theorists are that dangerous, shall we say?
Okay.
If you just
It
thinking,
can
if
be
you
a
just
hobby.
believe one, yeah, if you just believe one thing, oh, I'm into JFK or something like that,
The moon
or
landing.
Bigfoot. Yeah, exactly. If
Yeah.
you, everyone's got questions, right?
Atlantis. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's fine. Everyone can should have questions and explore the mystery, shall we say? But when you start getting carried away and thinking that absolutely everything is involved in this conspiracy world, like
Hmm.
that's where it becomes a little bit dangerous and you become easily manipulated by other people.
So I have a couple follow-up questions then on that. One, what do you mean by a grand conspiracy? Sort of just everything in the world is controlled by something?
Yeah.
Or okay.
So let's go back to the event conspiracy. That's a conspiracy theory around an event that happens. So you
Hmm.
think there's other actors involved in it. Like let's say 9/11 was an inside job, that conspiracy theory. So you can kind of just say, oh, the government or various intelligence services were involved in this thing. And then you get a bit further for the systemic conspiracy theories. And that's where you kind of think like there's this whole system against it. To be fair, I feel like there's a difference between left wing and right wing conspiracy theories. And I think a lot of left wing people get caught up in the systemic conspiracy theories.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
But then that's only about, like, say, the CIA or something being involved in everything. And then you get the bigger one, which is the grand conspiracy or the great conspiracy, where absolutely everything is basically ruled by this. To me, it was a network of secret societies and cults.
Okay.
They were the ones running the show. So they controlled academia, they controlled the corporate world, they controlled entertainment industry, politics, everything. Like they had a hidden hand in everything. So
So
to
like an
me,
Illuminati type group or
yes,
something like that.
yeah,
Okay.
for lack of
Um,
a better term,
yeah, but that's just an example rather than being what it actually is. It's just some hidden shadowy
absolutely.
control or something like that. Huh. So I don't know, you interact regularly with the conspiracy communities online. I mean, would you argue that many of them or most of them is conspiracism representative of most people, or do most people just have one or two conspiracy theories that they're into?
I think the people that I tend to engage with are full-on conspiracists. It seems to be either systemic conspiracists or grand conspiracists.
In many ways, it strikes me as once you believe in one conspiracy theory, in a sense, you're arguing that this event is the media, the politicians, the experts are lying or wrong on it. And so once you've become convinced of that, I guess it starts to also become easier to believe in something like a grand conspiracy and start to make it into something even larger. Do conspiracists use events to try to recruit? Or is this just totally organic? How does this play out in an online sphere, I guess?
Yeah, I would say like the conspiracists definitely use events, but events are the thing that make you stop and question
Okay.
what's actually going on. So a really great example was 9/11. 9/11 was one of those things where like the world stopped and everyone was trying to figure out, well, what are we seeing here? Are we all
Hmm.
under threat of something bigger happening? Like, what's the repercussions of this? That could there even be a bigger threat because of that? Going back, there was a lot of people in conspiracy movements at that time that
Hmm.
hopped onto it and started trying to shift the narrative and give their own narratives. And you could see the exact same thing happened around the pandemic.
Yes, I was
Everyone
thinking
was
that, yeah.
very, very, very scared about what was going on, and lots of people jumped in on these fears,
Hmm.
and like there's even people that were out there trying to say like, okay, well, viruses actually don't exist, so you don't have to be scared of any of this, and
I
and it,
smile, but this is not
yeah,
actually funny. It's serious. It's just a instinctual reaction to almost smile and laugh at something that you don't understand and can't wrap your
yeah,
head around. How could people believe viruses don't exist? I can't get that. But of course, most people who lived until fairly recently in human history had no idea that viruses existed. So,
true,
nobody's seen a virus except for a very few small group of researchers, after all, or they've
yeah,
seen photos of it, but not like directly. That's interesting, and I mean that certainly tracks. Also, I guess so. You were a conspiracist from 2003 to 2018, if I remember, and so
yeah.
that timeline with 9/11 sort of being an inflection event for you. So we've talked a lot, or at least some, about how you were a fan of sort of alternative history and pseudo-archaeology sort of narratives. And I'm curious how it overlapped in a sense. When did you become a fan of alternative history versus when did you start engaging with conspiracy theories?
To be fair, I've always enjoyed a good pyramid mystery and like 40 times type of stuff, Sasquatch, unsolved mysteries. Always enjoyed that growing up, but it wasn't anything like necessarily that I built my worldview on.
Yeah.
It was conspiracism that took me down the rabbit hole. I became a believer, obviously, in like inside jobs and secret societies running the world
Hmm. Hmm.
before I started to look into the the ancient archaeology kind of stuff.
Okay.
Um, that to be fair, like I think nexus of power actually was because there was a
Hmm.
lot of talk about how they'd maybe been in control or sort of in control for millennia. I start kind of looking into it in that sense. And like for me, one of the things that opened me up to a lot of authors and speakers in this realm was the Coast to Coast AM radio show. They would invite people on from David Icke and Alex Jones and people like that, and then have Graham Hancock and other people like that on there. So it's still going today, but they tend to not have very many conspiracists involved anymore. It's more to do with all like the kind of Anunnaki sort of things and ancient, well, not even just ancient aliens, today's UFOs and stuff. Much more fringe beliefs. They've seemed to have stepped away ever since Alex Jones got sued for
Hmm.
the defamation. They've kind of rebranded and not don't seem to have very many conspiracy theorists on anymore because I think they might
They're
be
worried about getting in trouble. Yeah.
absolutely.
So how then is these sort of foundational prehistory, thousands of years ago, these narratives, how is it intertwined with this grand conspiracy? I mean, there's a lot of these different versions, for example, of how prehistory came about. There's things from ancient astronauts to variations of that with the reptile people to the same sites being explained by a lost civilization. You've talked about how were a fan of both, say, David Icke and Graham Hancock, but they have very different points of view on this stuff. So how did you reconcile that?
I think it's just because they're not mainstream.
Hmm.
So I was open to just listening to anything that wasn't mainstream, anything that wanted to speak about these fringe topics. Say with David Icke, I didn't listen to or believe everything that he talked about, specifically the reptiles. Like I thought, okay, that's a bit silly, but maybe the reptile thing means something else.
Aha.
So maybe it's like this genetic code or something that they all have. So all throughout the centuries and the millennia, people who had serpents in their insignia and stuff like that meant that they were a part of this bloodline. I became very Christian and very extremist in my views at some point.
Huh.
So I kind of laid it back to the serpent in the Garden of Eden. That's what it represented. It didn't actually mean physical reptiles. But I would still listen to him because he was tracing this serpent imagery through millennia back
Hmm.
to the Babylonians. Like when I first got into it, his main description of these elite leaders or whatever were the Babylonian Brotherhood. They like kind of went through all of history essentially. They rebranded as civilizations moved on.
I see what you're saying. So you're into it, maybe not for the exact conclusions that he draws, but the details and the patterns. This
Yeah.
hyperdiffusionism combining serpents and snakes from all kinds of different cultures, which, of course, all engage with serpents and snakes, and therefore
Yeah.
are going to
Yeah.
have them in their iconography. That pattern became something that you would trace and fit into your own view of
Yeah.
a grand conspiracy. That sort of do your own research type way of looking at it.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like Graham Hancock would speak about the same stuff,
Yes,
or
he
he
does.
would show about like the serpents and serpent kings and different things like that. So it's kind of just you're just looking at all of this stuff, and with Hancock, he kind of made it more palatable because he wasn't talking about actual genuine reptiles, but kind of showing that these things were based in real archaeology or something. Like he would go back to the actual structures and show that yes, this civilization was here and this civilization was there, and how they all somehow linked together.
Hmm.
But obviously, having after having our conversation, like you hit me with an idea of like, hold on, all of this stuff is being told out of context, and it's different eras of time and different geographical places. Like none of it actually
Relates,
links
yeah.
together.
You know, it's kind of like this idea that comes up all the time of flood myths all being the same flood. And it's like, just in our lifetime, we've seen hugely horrific floods that have led to lots of stories, like Fukushima, the tsunami and a flood that took out the nuclear power plant, to Katrina, a hurricane. And that's just within, yours and my lifetime. We haven't even been alive that very long. And so
Yeah.
to think that every single one of these stories is referring to the same event is to jump to I don't know, a conclusion that does not, for some reason, take account of all the rest of human history that these things could have be related to.
Like with Fukushima or the Sumatra tsunami and Hurricane Katrina, like they're all like kind of decades apart.
Yeah,
But if you looked at it 1,000 years later and you kind of look back at it, you could kind of get confused about the timeline there, and then think that it's all one thing.
especially if
Because
we have global warming and sea level rising. And
yeah,
then, what they find from this period is something like the what was it on Netflix, the show about Fukushima. And it's like, see, this is how global warming is impacting them and the great flood that sort of destroys cities over the 21st century. And it's just like, no, actually, it's something completely different. It's not all the same. And it's something we need to think about how to talk to people about in a sense. And I think Graham does a good job of appearing very plausible. Like you mentioned, how you might not see the serpents as actual serpents, but as symbology. I remember in Ancient Apocalypse, he talks about how I don't mean these myths are not referring to physical giants, but maybe mental giants, people who are more intelligent and stuff like that. And so it's that way of framing that's very clever.
Most
Yeah.
people, wouldn't buy the idea of physical giants. Well, it's because of the obvious, really.
Yeah, we've never seen any. If you see what I mean, we believe stuff that's more likely to have been seen in front of us. You've mentioned to me, I think, and in the interview, that you and your partner were big fans of Graham, and you referred to him sometimes as Uncle Graham.
Yeah.
How does the personality of these influencers, let's say, impact what you believe and how you think of it?
Okay, recently have been rewatching the first season of Ancient Aliens. Again, me and my partner have both sat there watching it and going, but these people are so nice. They're not like, say, someone like Alex Jones, who's
Hmm.
very, very angry all the time, like he's some sort of WWE wrestler. They come across genuinely kind and nice. So I think it disarms you, not coming across like all lofty or aggressive. To just like, yeah, people don't like us because we have these weird ideas, but I don't know why they don't like us because we're really nice. That's just the impression that I had rewatching it. And it's like, yeah, it's hard to like hate on these people when they're genuinely just kind. Yeah, like I said, it definitely disarms you.
I think you mentioned 2 times you've seen Graham Hancock talk in public.
I enjoyed Graham Hancock quite a lot, and it was quite depressing finding out like actually this is still conspiracism.
I just saw one of his recent talks on YouTube, and he comes off as like super charismatic Oxford professor. He comes off as posh,
Yeah,
informed, and energetic and passionate. It's hard because I mean, he's not an Oxford professor, and he ignores and gets a lot of facts absolutely wrong. So it's tough to have to explain to people that. Do you have any advice for experts and archaeologists like me on how to combat that particular conspiracy theory and that particular group? Part of the reason I asked you about the talk was I was wondering if you had a sense of the people that were also in the audience, what they were like, and how to approach people that would go to such a talk, right?
yeah. I think when it comes to like these kinds of people, these ancient archaeology, sort of David Hatcher Childress and those sorts of people, is because they're nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe it's not a good thing to attack their character. And the only reason why people are listening to it is because they have that gap in their knowledge. You can try and fill those gaps and say, oh, actually, what he said here is kind of incorrect. And here's the gap that you're missing. To me, like what you said about the floods was a brilliant like gap filler to me. What you said about how all of this was out of context according to the era and the geography, like it was like, oh yeah, hold on, there's a timeline here that I'm not looking at. This is what I think really helps, just having those gaps of knowledge filled, especially when talking about those sorts of people, because if you're attacking the character of some of these like people that come across as nice, it doesn't really bode well with the people that look up to them because they're nice and they're the ones that are supposedly filling that gap of knowledge that we have.
It's funny, the nice thing though, because it's also such a double standard because he's very aggressive in his attacks on archaeologists, right? You start off that show and there's quotes
Yeah,
of him saying we're arrogant, patronizing, we want to shut down all conversation, and it's just like it
that's
throughout.
poisoning the well, isn't it?
Yeah, and throughout the conversation that he has with Joe Rogan at times, or throughout the show, throughout his books are a little less so, but the talks he gives and stuff like that in person, he's very nice to everybody except for archaeologists, and so it makes it very difficult to respond in treating him as a nice person because we've not been treated nicely from him. In fact, the title of the article I wrote for the Conversation UK was Graham Hancock Declares War on Archaeology. And that's how I got introduced to it. Was first 5 minutes is I'm arrogant, I'm patronizing, I'm a jerk, I'm hiding things. And it's just like, whoa, all right, yeah, this is what I want to
Yeah.
see on my Netflix representing archaeology.
He's like representing archaeology as a monolith and
Yeah.
academia as a monolith. That's something that appeals to conspiracists. That's how I viewed the world. And coming away from it and having all these experiences I've had now, like getting to speak to yourself, getting to speak to people in the media, in the news, in the press, and you start to see how actually this monolith thing is ridiculous. It's actually built up of normal people.
I think that that's important, is to recognize that these are communities of people, and there's a lot of different reasons that archaeologists do what they do, and they're a group of
Mhm.
different people. But same thing with people who believe these things; they have a lot of different backgrounds and reasons.
Like
Yeah.
I've been listening to Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World.
Hmm.
Like that's been very enlightening to me, like actually listening to that. And there was a chapter recently that I was reading. It said about how even scientists have like bias. They have their
Yeah, of
religious
course.
bias, they have their political bias because they're people.
Hmm.
You know, that's all it comes down to. We're all people and we all have our ideas of how the world runs and how it doesn't run. So
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. So that also then leads to another difficult thing for explaining to people, is the way that these sorts of theories are not just wrapped up in conspiracy communities, because they try to show how experts should not be trusted. So that's certainly one aspect, and they try to show that there is this conspiracy and whatnot, and that helps lead to conspiracism. These theories, these ideas, they basically strip credit from indigenous people, and they say, all the structures built with large stones, megaliths, they must come from aliens or an advanced civilization or something like that. And most of those structures, of course, are built by non-white people around the world. Those ideas lead to, a very implicit racism against local communities. And so it's a tough thing to explain how something is racist without making an accusation of racism, if you see
Yeah.
what I mean.
Totally, because I'm guilty of that myself. As being the conspiracist that I was, like I used to talk about the Rothschild banking system,
Hmm.
yeah, and not having an anti-Semitic bone in my body. I
Yeah.
just thought they were one other family of the complete Illuminati. You know, I used to think obviously like the Queen and the royal family was part of it, or Obama was part of it. So it wasn't like I was thinking of it being anti-Semitic. But now knowing like all these tropes actually came from anti-Semitic
Semitism.
like roots, and I was pushing that, and so people could like look at my past and be like, oh, he was a far right Nazi guy pushing Jewish conspiracies, and it's like I wasn't like I didn't, that wasn't my intent, that's for damn sure. So I can see the same thing with this subject.
What got you to click and realize the harm in it, I guess? Did you have a moment of, wow, I did something that's harming people? Or how did that come across in your brain, in your journey?
It didn't happen until I was out of the conspiracy world.
Okay.
When I came out of the conspiracy world in 2018, I started to think, right, I need to kind of rebuild my worldview. Like what happened here? What is exactly did I believe in? Why did I believe it? Who the hell pushed this into the world? And so the more and more I started to, instead of researching conspiracies, I started to research conspiracy theory and
Okay.
trying to figure out where all this kind of stuff came from. And after a while, I started to find out basically where like the anti-Semitic kind of trope started coming from, the Rothschild stuff started coming from. I still didn't really see much of a harm in it that much. It took a while to accept it, but the thing that really did make me see the harm of conspiracies was both the pandemic and January 6th.
Huh. Oh, that makes sense. So around the same time, even.
Yeah, I just saw, because I was out and I had this weird perspective of actually being out on the outside now looking in,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that I could see how people were becoming manipulated by other people through this conspiracy beliefs. I could see so many people like rejecting COVID,
Mm-hmm.
acting like it didn't exist, and like rejecting face masks and other sorts of measures to minimize harm, and seeing like people in the conspiracy world get very sick or die because of these beliefs. That started making me go, oh, this is actually very, very dangerous. And then it all culminates on January 6th. Again, manipulated people into believing all this like really, really harsh conspiracy stuff. When I saw that Ashley Babbitt get killed, and then on the next day, like her Facebook and Twitter and everything was revealed, and it showed what she believed, and she believed so much similar stuff to what I had believed. Like
Hmm.
I thought at that point, I need to actually stop learning about this stuff and actually start speaking about this because this is harmful. This is dangerous. Going through it with like the thoughts of the pandemic and the COVID denial and everything, I also now started to see, like you said, don't trust the experts. Let's not listen to any of the scientists, and that's where I could see it actually getting wrapped up in the same stuff that people like Graham would talk about. It's again like don't trust academia, don't trust science, and start denying reality essentially.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's just got really, really dangerous. And I noticed the real world harm of it.
So how do we deal with this difference between more dangerous conspiracies, something like anti-vaccination legitimately hurts you and your loved ones. Others can inspire people towards violence versus something that's more entertainment, but still has its pervasive issues with things like, prejudices, whether anti-Semitism or racism. Should we be treating these differently? Should we be treating them as, roots and branches from the same tree? How would you recommend experts and others go about tackling this in public?
I think just treating all of them as either true or false and not about like what weight they hold, like
Hmm.
what could happen because of believing in them. Maybe only just deal with this is true, this is false.
So I mean, obviously we see this rise in beliefs in these sorts of different conspiracies, especially in the last, I don't know, 5, 10, maybe even since the internet, 20 years, something like that. In that time, there's been a lot of debunking that goes on. But it still continues in popularity. I mean, do you think that it's throw everything at it type thing, or do you think there's better and worse approaches to dealing with conspiracies and conspiracy theories? What's your thoughts from where you're at, I guess?
Again, I think that there's so many different types of people in the world. Some people you have to be kind to. Some people you can prod a little bit. Some people are going to wake up because of that. They want the fight, and if you can meet them on that side, then maybe you can. I don't think there's a one size fits all way to deal with this because people aren't one size fits all. And
Yeah.
I'm been trying to figure that out myself. Like how exactly can I do this? How do I work on this? Because I go after conspiracism,
Hmm.
me actually doing it is hard because they
Hmm.
think I'm part of the conspiracy now. That's
Yes, of
how what it
course.
comes down to. So they really just think I'm a shill or an agent, and it doesn't matter how I approach them, trying to be their friend or trying to push them or whatever. It kind of doesn't really matter because they've got this view of me anyway. So what I've been trying to really do more is to work with friends and families of these people who are falling down.
Hmm.
If I can help them understand it more, I can give them the tools to engage with their loved ones rather than shutting them down or enabling their beliefs, then I think that's the best way for myself to do it.
Your case is interesting too. From what I've seen and how you presented it elsewhere, you realized on your own to get out of the rabbit hole because conspiracists were picking up new conspiracies that you thought were BS in a sense, right? So it wasn't experts reaching you, right? It was just the community itself. You were now out of sync with it. But on the other hand, in your journey out of the rabbit hole, it seems like you've engaged with many experts and you've gone and found more legitimate sources to help you. Then once you already have the decision and spark in your own self, those resources are useful, if you see what I mean. So I guess there's some utility to having real information out there because when people are ready for it, it will be there for them, if you see what I mean. That's also why you're working with family members and loved ones, because they're obviously receptive to your experience and the information that you provide.
Yeah.
And hopefully they can translate that for their loved ones. That's how I think of it. I think of it as we put out as much as we can. Look, it's going to reach some people, it's not going to reach others, and there's not much we can do. I'm not trying to force anybody to believe anything. It's going to be on people to believe what they believe, right?
Yeah, totally.
Um,
You can't force people out of a position. You can just try and coax them to take that journey themselves. Like some
mhm.
one of the things I do talk when I do talk to conspiracists is I try and say, go on, listen to the podcast. I challenge yourself. If you really believe what you believe so much, then it shouldn't be so hard to listen to the other side. And if you don't like what I've said, debunk it. Let's see what you got.
I
you
think
know?
that's a great way to go about it. And in particular, one of the things that I've been struggling with as I research the world of pseudoarchaeology is how they have their whole universe. They have their whole type sites. They have their whole artifacts that are meaningful. This is their version of the archaeological record. And it's such a weird, cherry picked version of one site here, one site there, one site there, and it ignores everything else. But it's a huge number of sites and artifacts and stuff like that. And then you have different influencers, let's say, or authors or presenters who interpret that universe in different ways. So everybody
Oh
has a
yeah.
different thought on the Sphinx or Gunung Padang or the pyramids around the world or whatever it is. But what you try to do is challenge them to look at other stuff that is not part of that universe and hope that clicks something in their brain that will say get them to think, oh wait, it's not just pyramids, it's other stuff too that archaeologists look at, you know? It's a difficult thing though, because there is that universe that exists, that ecosystem of conspiracy.
When you're in the conspiracy mindset, you're coming across information and it's like you're solving a puzzle. You're going, you have these eureka moments of, that's now it all fits. This fits, now that fits. And I'm having that same thing now. Feels much more significant because it's actually based more in a reality. I'm actually filling all those gaps of knowledge that I had. Like that conversation with us, with you and me, is definitely giving me a better way of looking at things of like, let me actually put this in a timeline.
Yeah.
Let me actually put this in context. Or that doesn't make sense with that. Rewatching Ancient Aliens was just mind blowing because it did hop from one era to the next era, geographically this place, geographically that place, and be like, it was just all over the place. And I hadn't noticed that before. But having that conversation with you just helped me actually realize the Gish Gallop
Yeah, the
that they were
strategy
doing.
of that.
Again, going back to the Carl Sagan book, The Demon Haunted World, one of his things in the baloney detector kit was like, does the rest of the evidence also fit this hypothesis? Just because you found one or two anomalies, what about the rest of the stuff? So, for instance, like the pyramids or whatever, like, yeah, you can find this supposed anomalies that you think that it's aligned to Orion or aligned to the poles, et cetera, et cetera. But what about all the rest of the stuff, like the sites of where the builders were and everything else that just shows,
And
like,
all the other
actually,
pyramids too,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I mean, yes,
that there
most
was,
pyramids are aligned north south, but the Orion thing, it's just, yeah, it's just that one, three
yeah.
pyramids, somehow three pyramids lines up, and it's like there are three there, you know.
Yeah,
They're gonna
I
make a
know.
kind of wonky line.
But it definitely has given me an idea to have a different perspective, to actually open my mind up. I still enjoy watching fringe stuff, listening to fringe arguments. I still am somewhat entertained by it. I just don't actually believe it. The most important thing that I learned from a lot of this ancient stuff was to not take the allegories literal. That is 100% where I failed. I literally thought like the ancient gods were actual beings and not like allegories or myths or like the Epic of Gilgamesh. I thought that was real. Like Gilgamesh was real. Zarathustra was real. And having that idea of actually it's allegory, it's mythology, it's something totally different. It speaks to a different part of us,
Yeah.
and that's why it's repeated in different places across the world because those are very human like attributes.
hmm But that's
So
also why it's very malleable. It's changing all the time. When you go watch Troy, the movie, that's different from the Iliad, but it still speaks to us, right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
I think that's the most important thing that I learned from all of this. That as like I've only just come to accept.
this is why I wanted to have you on to start to draw out these kind of connections and to think through how to keep sharing truth as best as we can and facts as best as we can. And I hope we'll continue this conversation in a different venue or whatever. Yeah, because I think it's an important one
Absolutely.
to have. Any final points you want to bring up about archaeology or any of this stuff and its overlap with conspiracy thinking?
Hey, question everything. Don't trust anyone. But just like investigate.
All right. Thank you, Brent. Go check out Some Dare Call It Conspiracy. It's a fantastic podcast on conspiracies, conspiracism, Brent's journey out of the rabbit hole, and more. So thank you so much.
Thank you.